Dragons play a huge role in D&D, literally being half the name of Dungeons and Dragons. But aside from like 3 different Dragon Slayer items, there's no real good way to fight one. So what if instead of using a dragon slaying weapon, you could be the Dragon Slayer? Well, if you like how that sounds, you're in luck, because this week on the Game Master's Guide, we are building Natsu Dragneel, the Fire Dragon Slayer from Fairy Tail. Super simple rule set. As long as whatever I'm looking to use is from an official Wizards of the Coast book, it is good to go. And of course, we will be using the standard point array of 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. And before we hop in, make sure to go check out the main channel, Game Master's Domain, where I have built a Dragon Slayer Warlock subclass that you can get completely for free. And subscribe and do all the YouTube stuff. I do read all the comments looking at suggestions for character builds and homebrews. Okay. Now we can get into the build.
I can handle the 2 of you myself. Come on, give me all you got.
Natsu Dragneel, a pretty weird kid all things considered. Up until the age of 7, he was raised by a dragon. And not just any dragon. He was raised by the Fire Dragon King. And Natsu would stay with Igneel until he was around 10 years old, learning to hunt, read, write, and do a bunch of other useful things he would need in the human world. Because one day, Igneel, the Fire Dragon King, for all intents and purposes, Natsu's father, just vanished. Obviously, Natsu went to look for his dad, and over the years eventually found the Fairy Tail Guild, who would take him in and help raise him the rest of the way into what he is now. A carefree and reckless brawler who literally fights fire with fire. Because sure, Igneel spent some time teaching Natsu to hunt, read, write, all that stuff, but he spent probably a lot more time teaching Natsu how to use Dragon Slayer magic. Literally magic meant to kill dragons. Why a dragon is teaching this to people? I don't know. Why he taught it to a kid? I'm even less sure. Now, despite Fairy Tail being considered a wizard guild, and everyone who uses magic in the show being called wizards, Natsu is not really a caster. Like 90% of Natsu's spells are just him hitting you really hard with fire on his fists. He does have a breath attack, but that's really his only major ranged attack. Oh, and somewhere along the line after joining Fairy Tail, he found an egg, and out of that egg came a cat. So I'll do with that what I can. The point is, this magic gives Natsu quite a few benefits actually, including being almost completely immune to fire. Because one of the main gimmicks of being a Dragon Slayer, or really any kind of Slayer in the Fairy Tail universe, is that you can consume your element. In Natsu's case, being raised by the Fire Dragon King, he is able to consume fire in pretty much any form. Like seriously, he is the wizard's worst enemy. It doesn't matter how many fireballs he throws, Natsu's just gonna eat them. Something else about Dragon Slayer magic I want to cover real quick is how it enhances your senses. Natsu has a crazy sense of smell, along with hearing and sight that's better than most people. And Cobra, the Poison Dragon Slayer, has hearing so good he can read your thoughts. So what does this tell us about the start for Natsu's build? Well, I had originally planned to go with Outlander for his background, but Igneel did teach him to read, and Natsu isn't really an uncivilized barbarian, he's just kinda rough around the edges. So I just went with a custom background and took survival and intimidation for the skills there. So when it comes to Natsu's stats, he's a little bit of a meathead, so I'm going to give him a 15 in strength, 14 in wisdom for those enhanced senses, and after that, 13 in con, 12 in dex, 10 in charisma, and 8 in intelligence. And of course, some of these numbers are going to get a bump right away, as soon as we talk about his species. The only issue is that is kinda hard to talk about. So if you don't want spoilers for Fairy Tail, go ahead and skip to here. Okay, everyone's still here? Good. So there are a few different ways you could take Natsu's species. Technically, he was born as a human, until he wasn't anymore. Then he could be considered one of 2 different things. Either a tiefling, if you want to go in a weird way, or a reborn. And while the fire resistance of a tiefling does fit for Natsu, the whole look of a horned and red-skinned with a tail doesn't really work. And a reborn is also interesting, but none of the features really fit for Natsu either. And human is kinda boring. I could get an extra feat going with human, but I want that fire resistance. So the race I think fits Natsu best thematically is going to be the Fire Genasi. I really didn't expect to use this race 2 weeks in a row, but whatever. Being a Fire Genasi gets Natsu 3 things that are very important here. Dark Vision, because of his enhanced sight, some free fire spells, because he is a Fire Dragon Slayer, and most importantly, fire resistance. And right now, resisting fire is the best we can do for eating fire, but we'll cover that later. So I mentioned before how Natsu really isn't a caster, and you might have seen this coming with the 14 in Wisdom, but I'm going to start Natsu off as a monk, specifically with 3 levels in monk for the Ascendant Dragon subclass. And this gives Natsu the basic monk stuff: unarmored defense, martial arts, ki, and unarmored movement. But what I'm here for right now is at level 3, Draconic Discipline and Breath of the Dragon. With Draconic Discipline, Natsu is able to read, speak, and write Draconic, can reroll Intimidation or Persuasion checks, and gets to change the damage type of his unarmed strikes to Acid, Cold, Lightning, Poison, or Fire damage. Obviously, we're going with Fire. If you want to play as a different Dragon Slayer, pick a different damage type. But I think more important than Draconic Discipline is Breath of the Dragon, right away giving Natsu his Fire Dragon Roar, letting Natsu replace one of his currently 3 attacks with a 20-foot cone or 30-foot line of fire damage. This is so much better than the Dragonborn's breath weapon, because that one takes an action. This only takes a single attack out of your attack action. The damage of this also goes up once you hit level 11, and it has a number of uses equal to your proficiency bonus. And even once you're done with those, you can just spend 2 key points to use it again. Now there is a lot more to go over with the monk, but real quick, I'm just gonna go pick up Happy, just 1 sec. Okay, the plan for Happy is super simple. Taking a 3-level dip into Drakewarden Ranger. Now before you say anything, I am aware Happy is a cat, that is very true, but counterpoint, Beastmaster Ranger sucks. Now that's not my only reason for going with Drakewarden over doing anything else like taking Magic Initiate and getting Find Familiar. I do want a few ranger spells too, like Hunter's Mark and Searing Smite, both for tracking and for doing more damage, because I don't see why you can't smite your unarmed strikes. But most importantly for Natsu here is going to be Absorb Elements. Really the only way we have to eat fire when it comes at us, or, funnily enough, he can also use it to eat lightning. I really didn't expect 3 levels in Ranger to give me some coverage for Lightning Fire Dragon mode. But most importantly, Drakewarden Ranger gets you Happy. And honestly, I'm pretty sure this version of Happy is stronger than the regular version of Happy. The only real difference is this one can't fly yet, and it's not going to be able to because we're not going that far in Ranger. We're actually not going any further in Ranger since the rest of Natsu's levels are all going to be in Monk. So let's go down the list of all the important things. Level 4 of Monk gets Natsu his first ASI, which he is going to use to grab 1 more cast of Absorb Elements, just to have an extra one in the back pocket. After all, Natsu never really stops being able to eat fire. He doesn't really get full. But after that, we are jumping to level 6 for Wings Unfurled, which kinda lets Natsu have just a taste of Dragon Force, letting him grow spectral wings whenever he uses Step of the Wind. It's nice and kind of explains why Natsu can stay up in the air for so long, so I like it. After that, Natsu's next ASI at level 8 is going to be Gift of the Chromatic Dragon, since Dragneel, his dad, was a red dragon. And in this case, he is going to focus on Chromatic Infusion, which as a bonus action lets him touch a simple or martial weapon and add 1d4 fire damage to it for the next minute. And guess what? Your fists are indeed simple weapons. Meaning you can set this up on your previous turn for 1d4, add a Searing Smite on top of it for more fire damage, and then using Draconic Discipline you can change the entire damage type to fire. And these combined with the spells he gets from being a Fire Genasi, Burning Hands, and Flame Blade, you can pretty much make any of Natsu's spells. Fire Dragon Iron Fist, Fire Dragon Wing Attack, Dragon Sword Horn, Brilliant Flame, doesn't matter, they're all just some variety of the same thing. Now there are a few spells I think we're missing out on here, like Arshuttalon's Stride and just Fireball, but dipping into another class for those would stretch the stats and the levels a little too far for my liking. Which means we're sticking with Monk all the way to level 11 for the next feature, Aspect of the Worm. This gives you 2 different options for an aura around you for 1 minute, And really, Natsu isn't going to use the Aura of Resistance because it gives your damage resistance to your allies nearby you, and that's not something Dragon Slayers do. Something Natsu does do a lot though is scare the piss out of people, so the Frightful Presence Aura works perfectly. And right away after level 11 is level 12, which means another ASI. And in this case, you can either go with a +2 to Strength, or take the Resilient feat for a +1 to Con, and to get Con saves. The order of these two doesn't really matter, but I kind of feel like Natsu is really tanky early on, and he just kind of keeps going with that. So maybe take Resilient now and up Strength later. Alternatively, you could take the Tough feat for just more HP, but I feel like Con saves works better here. Mostly because of the rocks he ate that kind of poisoned him with different kinds of magic, and he just muscled through it and beat the crap out of Jalal anyway. He also just will not stay down. Like, he gets beaten to a pulp so much. That aside though, the last big thing for Natsu, aside from Tongue of the Sun and Moon, Diamond Soul, and Timeless Body, is the level 17 feature for his subclass, Ascendant Aspect, which is really gonna act like his Dragon Force. And I say Dragon Force because Ascendant Aspect gives you 3 entirely separate buffs that you always have depending on the circumstances. Like, you just get blind sight in a radius of 10 feet around you, which means it doesn't matter if someone is invisible or they blind you or something else. As long as you are not unconscious on the floor, you are aware of everyone within 10 feet of you. You can also spend Ki to triple the range of your breath attacks, making it a 60-foot cone or a 90-foot line. And where before your breath attack did 3 times your martial arts die in damage, if you spend 1 Ki, now it does 4, which is 4d10 at this level. And lastly, you just get to explode. Explosive Fury lets you blow up whenever you use your Aspect of the Worm. Choosing any amount of creatures that fit within your 10-foot radius for Aspect of the Worm, and forcing them to make a dex save or take 3d10 of your elemental damage. Which in this case with Natsu, that means it's going to be fire damage. And that is as far as we can go level-wise, since we are stuck with going to level 20. But now that we're done with all that, let's go back and see what Natsu can do and if we missed anything. So in one turn, Natsu can make 4 unarmed attacks, spend 2 Ki points to both do Flurry of Blows, and swap one of those attacks for a Dragon Breath attack that deals 4d10 damage at a range of 90 feet. Which means with a little bit of forethought, putting Searing Smite and Gift of the Chromatic Dragon, Natsu can deal 1d6 plus 3d4 plus 3d10 plus 4d10 plus 12, which with average rolls would be somewhere around 67 damage. And he can do all of that every turn, aside from the Searing Smite. And while Natsu's AC isn't great, only being 14, he has plenty of ways to mitigate damage. First, he is resistant to fire damage, one of the most common damage types in the game. And even if he does take fire damage or any other element, he can use Absorb Elements to get even more damage on his next attack and reduce the damage he takes. He can kind of fly, meaning when the dragon does show up, he doesn't have to just wait on the ground for it to land. He can go fight it in the air on its own turf. And lastly, he has Happy. I don't know what Happy's gonna do here, he's stuck on the ground, but he is there and he's a friend. Oh, and I didn't mention it earlier, but at level 2 of Ranger we did grab the Unarmed Fighting Style. It just upped the damage of our punches faster than Monk would, but because it evened out in the end, I didn't really feel like bringing it up, but we did do that. Okay, so to recap this build for Natsu, he is a Fire Genasi, Drakewarden Ranger, Ascendant Dragon Monk, who does mostly fire and lightning damage with his punches, rather than just physical damage by punching you. He can track targets down with a mix of Hunter's Mark and his good perception skill, can absorb either fire, lightning, or really whatever he wants with Absorb Elements and a free cast of Absorb Elements, or can just blow all of his spell slots on Searing Smites. And that about does it. I'm sure there are other ways you could build Natsu to focus more on the spellcasty-like aspects, but again, he just punches people. He doesn't really cast spells. Yes, he calls out the name of spells, and it is magic in his world, but he's not casting spells. That boy ain't casting. He is lighting his fist on fire and shoving it down your throat. Thank you guys for watching. If you want this build, you can find it on my Patreon under the $1 tier. And of course, I want to thank my patrons. They support me a lot, and I couldn't do this without them, so thank you guys so much. I will see you next week, And as always, have a wonderful day.